Hi everyone, and welcome to this IFSEC webinar in which we'll be looking at how Converged Security Centres can facilitate the digital transformation of the security sector. I'm James Moore, the editor of IFSEC Global, and today we'll be speaking with a team of experts on the issue of converged security. Moving on to the agenda of this session, I'll shortly hand over to the presenters, each of whom will provide their own expert insight into the subject matter. The agenda is on the screen now, and this webinar will be covering everything from an overview of converged security through to its role in smart buildings and some insightful case uses. Please feel free to submit any questions you have to the speakers throughout the session, which we will then look to use as part of our Q&A session at the end. You can listen at your leisure today, as a copy of the recording and the slides will be emailed over to you after the session. Any questions that we do miss, we will also aim to get these answered and put them onto the IFSEC Global website in the next few weeks following this webinar. Should you have any technical issues this afternoon, please report them by clicking on the technical support button on the screen. I'll finish this introduction by giving a brief overview of the presenters' backgrounds. James Willison has more than 20 years of management experience in the physical and information security industry, including posts as advisor on convergence to the MITI TSM board, senior lecturer at Loughborough University and digital security expert with the European Union. He was also awarded the Imbert Prize for Outstanding Contribution to the Security Industry in 2011. Saab Sembi currently works as CTO, CISO and DPO for Virtually Informed and is a regular speaker and contributor to several risk and security initiatives. He was part president of the London chapter of ISACA and has carried out vast research into the vulnerabilities of networked CCTV systems. John Gill brings 3 decades of experience in domestic and international security and is currently vice president for Sales and Business Development at Vidsys. Prior to joining the private sector, John retired from the US Secret Service after 20 years and has also held the position of Chief Security Officer at the White House. Finally, Joe Leon holds the position of Director of Product Marketing for Security Operations at Micro Focus. Prior to this role, he was the Product Marketing Lead for Unstructured Data Analytics and Endpoint Data Protection. So, moving on to the good stuff, I was originally handing over to James Willison first, and who will give an overview of converged security, but I'm going to pass over to Saab initially, who will discuss smart buildings with you. I'll just skip through the slides, one moment. Okay, Saab, off you go.
Thank you very much, James. Okay, I'm going to be talking about smart environments and why they must have converged security centres. So basically, if we look at smart environments, they include smart buildings, smart campuses, venues, cities, and smart manufacturing. And you know, you can expand these because every type of environment more or less has its own set of requirements. However, there are some things that are similar, and that's the sort of thing that I'm going to be looking at. So first of all, existing security in many smart environments includes the policies, authentication, network security, firewalls, users and user privileged accounts, anti-malware. There's many different types of controls that are involved in the smart environments. And effectively, if you look at the device as well, going beyond the organization itself, the device and the application, you've got lots and lots of controls that are at those levels. Now, so you've got, first of all, at the organizational level, you've got at device level, you've got the application level. But the strange thing is, the current controls and the approaches that many smart environments use are actually inefficient for today's threat landscape when we're talking about smart environments. And really, if you're in a smart environment, and it's truly smart environment, what you're going to find is that it doesn't just rely on devices and applications, or a system, or even just multiple systems. It relies on systems and the system of systems. What I'm trying to explain there is that the levels that we're looking at here are levels which are far higher than those of which there are current controls for. The very high levels, there are very few sets of controls and few products that are sold out there as smart environment system products, which actually take on and build in controls at the system of system levels. So the question is, who is responsible for your system's security? And not just that, but who's responsible for your system of system security? And those two questions are usually within a smart environment not actually answered. And there is no one responsible because everything is covered at the much, much lower levels. And some of the myths around these include the myth that smart surveillance equals a smart building. Well, the thing is, if you've got a smart building and you stick smart cameras in there, it doesn't give you a smart building. Equally, if you've got smart monitoring, that doesn't give you a smart building either. And if you create several smart systems, that doesn't give you a smart building either. Because all these are more or less examples that if you translate them to a smart home, if you buy yourself a smart TV and a smart kettle, that doesn't mean you've got a smart home. If you buy yourself a smart CCTV system for your home, that doesn't mean you've got a smart home. Because effectively, you haven't got a smart home, and equally, you haven't got a smart building in any of these myths that I've covered here. And that applies same to the infrastructure, because London often calls itself as a smart city. And I would say that's not necessarily true, because having one smart infrastructure or two smart infrastructures, even 3 or 4 infrastructures, doesn't give you a smart city. It gives you a city with 1, 2, 3, 4 infrastructures, not necessarily a smart city. So what would make each of these systems a smarter system would be when you start integrating and you have a system of systems at the high level. So several smart infrastructures, I've already covered that. It doesn't equal a smart city. And intelligent of a single system does not equal a smart environment. And that's sort of thing that if you go to IFSEC or you go to any of the other large shows, you'll get vendors telling you that if you buy their system, you'll get a smart environment. And that's very, very untrue. These are myths. Multiple systems doesn't give you a smart environment either. So a true smart environment only becomes smart when all the systems that are connected so that data from them can be used to make better benefit decisions for everyone right across all the different systems. So until that point, what you find is you've only really got an environment that uses smart technologies and nothing more than that, and again, nothing less than that. So true smart environments would be open, an environment which is open, and there's an openness to smart environments which provides a greater level of monitoring as well as a greater level of security, which is required to ensure the confidentiality, integrity and availability of the whole environment, which means greater monitoring of each device, system and system of systems on a continuous basis. And the only solution that's able to provide that, as far as I know, and I've been looking around for things, is one that which will give you a single view of all the security risks in real time, and that's quite important. That's really a key to having a smart environment centre that's going to deal with some of the issues, risks, threats that you're going to be dealing with, and that really is what a Converged Security Centre is. Right, I'm going to have to go back a couple of slides and pass over to James, but I think James is going to do that for me. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Saab. Really interesting that. Just going to check with you everything now. James, can you hear us all okay? Okay, no worries. What we'll do is we'll pass over to John, if you're happy to go ahead, John, and introduce your slides and kick off.
Cheers. Yeah, thanks. Happy to do that. Welcome, everybody, and happy to be presenting to you today. Thanks for the kind introduction. As my colleagues have pointed out, organizational security has grown increasingly complex in recent years. In today's world, physical, external, and cyber security threats pose a very serious risk to an organization's daily operations. And while organizations are poised and prepared for incidents like natural disasters and acts of terrorism, the increasing reliance on digital devices and the emergence of and development of the IoT space, well, this has created more avenues than ever for an organizational security breach. Well, security centers are the first line of defense, alerting and response for both public and private organizations. And so there is an increasing need for forward-leaning organizations to support the convergence of the physical and IT security disciplines. Well, the reasons for this are evident in the increasing costs of not providing comprehensive security for your organization. Even a single situation can cause significant setbacks, and this can require months or even years of damage control to recover lost assets and to rebuild a business's reputation, as we've seen. And while it's clear that virtually every organization will sustain security incidents of some type, resulting in an organizational loss, what is not as well known is the often hidden costs in responding to and managing false or erroneous events that occur within an organization's security infrastructure. And so for enterprise level organizations, this can run into the millions of dollars in lost time, manpower, and efficiency. As we all well know, and to further underscore the points that are being made here today, we are living in an increasingly networked world. And so it is critical that security solutions keep pace with the fast-moving technologies that certainly allow us to obtain faster information or information faster, but it also presents new vulnerabilities that can cripple public and private organizations in a matter of seconds, which we've seen over the last several years. And for me, as we move from that physical to total security convergence, what this graphic really drives home is how we need to change the way we view and describe security solutions to an approach that now supports a more data-driven world. So traditional PSIM and other security center solutions provide only a partial organizational security picture. While they can collect data from certain physical devices such as cameras and other sensors, they are not capable of more widespread subsystem integration, and more importantly, providing a deeper analysis and insight into this collected information. A converged security center not only integrates a multitude of physical, logical, and IT security systems into one single unified platform, it manages the data in a way that allows organizations to mitigate risks that are unique to their own specific organizational needs in real time. By bringing together both physical and digital security systems, converged security centers help organizations manage complex data-driven projects like the support of smart cities, smart buildings, and transportation networks. A comprehensive CSIM solution, or Converged Security Information Solution, like Vidsys Enterprise, together with intelligent analytics like those provided through our integration partner Micro Focus, identifies correlations and patterns in security data, ensuring that complex, multifaceted threats do not fall through the cracks. So let's go through a couple of examples to illustrate what I'm talking about. In this example, this graphic is presenting a scenario from our converged solution where networked smart building sensors have alerted on a high temperature alarm on a facility's HVAC system. With a converged security solution, operators are not only provided with the alert, they are also presented with all of the information they need to both understand and resolve the situation in real time, preventing loss or damage to the organization. Here, the operator is automatically presented with a map within the city where the alert is coming from and all of the pertinent camera views that are proximate to the actual equipment in question. And then on the left-hand side, the operator is presented with a dynamic action plan that is based on the organization's own policies and procedures, and this allows the operator to manage the situation in real time, providing the ability to communicate the alert to pertinent personnel, all the way to creating a maintenance ticket if necessary, all from one pane of glass. Next, we have a situation that surfaces a potential insider threat to an organization, a increasingly difficult problem that we're finding in today's world. In this example, because the Converged Security solution interfaces with both the physical and cyber subsystems, it alerts on the simultaneous physical and cyber presence of an employee in two separate locations. Based on rules incorporated into the solution, an event is surfaced that alerts when an employee physically accesses a building with his credentials, while at the same time, that same employee's credentials are being used to access the organization's network from a different location. As in the previous example, the operator is presented with all of the information needed to both monitor and mitigate this event. In addition to presenting both the city and building floor plan, the operator can review video of the employee in question passing through the turnstile and visually compare that video with the employee's credentials. Further options in the action plan provide the operator with the ability to communicate to pertinent personnel and suspend the employee's credentials if necessary. So these are just two of many situations that Converged Security Centers can be poised to manage and mitigate risk across both the physical and cyber domains. As a matter of fact, you're going to hear from our partner Micro Focus on some other ways that efficiencies can be found in another sector. Thank you for your kind attention, and I'll look forward to answering any questions that you might have. I'll turn this over to Joe, unless gents, you want to move to the earlier part of the presentation.
Yep, Joe, happy to go ahead with yourself.
Okay, great. Thank you, James. Thank you, John. Appreciate the introduction here. Hey, guys, thank you for the opportunity to share some information with you today. And so what I'd like to do is take a look at an example in the transportation system, which could very well be in a smart city, for example. So here's an example of an AI-powered converged security. Okay, so when we talk about converged security here, we're talking about the convergence of cyber and physical securities. When we talk about artificial intelligence or AI in this context, we're talking about the intelligent automation of processing and analysis of a massive amount of data of diverse formats and from diverse sources to get the actionable insights for your operation. So let's take a look at this. In the cyberspace, we're generally looking at log data from your IT infrastructure, which consists of endpoint devices, servers, storage, networking, applications, security tools like firewalls and anti-malware. And on the physical side, we're talking about CCTVs, sensors, access control, etc. So here's an example here. So obviously there are many elements in the transportation system. And for the sake of simplicity, we'll look at the traffic lights and the CCTV for this example. So on the cyber front, we'll use AI to learn from the various activities centered around the traffic lights, such as switching, networking connections, or local connections. What I mean by local connection is where a technician makes a direct connection to the lights for, say, service purposes. Now, we use the learning from AI to establish baselines so the system has an understanding of the normal, quote-unquote, behavior, if you will, right? And should there be any irregularities or abnormalities, alerts can be generated. So, and also from the physical side, we use video analytics powered by AI to analyze CCTV footage where we can pick up unusual traffic flows, people movements, or unattended objects. So obviously, at the very basic level, a converged security center provides holistic situation awareness across both physical and the cyber domains. But also very important fact is that it enables a comprehensive approach for you to detect and defend against threats. Let's see how we do that in this example. So here, so in addition to obviously the expanded visibility, one of the key benefits is to kind of use this capability to help us connect the dots. So for SOC operators, you guys walk a very fine line between oversights and false alarms. And false alarms are very costly, as John has previously pointed out. So the more relevant information, the better your decision will be in addressing a threat. So let's look at this example. Right. The cybersecurity analytics of the traffic light may yield these potential threat indicators, a system or endpoints making connections to a news server, or external access made by somebody not known to the system, some unusual switching of lights, or unusual synchronization of lights in a particular area. And if you look at the physical side at the same time, so the physical security analytics of a CCTV may have a different set of potential threat indicators. So, for example, loitering of people near an area that is sensitive or secure, unusual spikes in traffic, could be human, it could be vehicular, unusual movement of cars or human beings, and or the appearance of an unusual object or a vehicle. So we can actually tell that, hey, that when I look at the image recognition, this vehicle is a black Honda, for example, but the plate that we picked up is indicating should be a red Toyota. So there's a mismatch plate right there. So that suggests something that's questionable, right? So the sort of power of connecting the dots is that we can uncover potentially related indicators that can cross-validate each other. So if you get an unusual synchronization of lights near an area where at the same time suspicious objects or vehicles are spotted, or within a very narrow time frame, we now have much better and richer intelligence for an effective decision how best to address the threats. So at Micro Focus, we believe in a comprehensive threat management approach. So our AI technologies for both physical and cyber security analytics complement Vidsys in delivering a converged security solution that basically breaks down the data silos. So all available data, regardless of the format or source, can be used in helping you put that puzzle together very quickly, so your analysts or your SOC operators can act fast with the right response. Okay, and with that, I'll pass it back to James.
Thank you very much, Joe. All really interesting points from both yourself and John. James has now joined the call, so I'm going to move back a little bit and introduce James again. So James, if you want to take it away, I'll get onto your slides 1 second.
Great.
You're welcome to start.
Thank you. Okay, everyone can hear me okay? Yeah?
Yes.
Fantastic. First of all, my apologies for being cut out, but I'm back. And I want to say, first of all, welcome to everyone from across the world, especially to our friends in Northern America, Southern America, and Italy, where we're thinking of you at the moment, and where pioneering work for convergence has begun with Dave Tyson, Alessandro Lega, and others who have led the way for convergence over the years. So first of all, I want to acknowledge that, and then say a bit about myself. I'm work with Saab Sembi, who spoke earlier. We are co-vice chairs of the Internet of Things Security Foundation, Smart Buildings Group, and that's relevant to what we're doing today, because as another dear colleague and friend who recently departed this world, passionately believed, like us, in a converged approach to information and physical security, where he set up a control room which included network monitoring So he borrowed and deployed technology, which I'm going to talk about a bit later in the presentation. So in terms of thanks, that's my main thank yous to my friends here and elsewhere. And my first slide here, the digital transformation of physical security. So quickly, over the past 20 years or so, corporate security and the CSO and the man guarding, the value of collaboration between the CISO and cross-functional teaming has gradually evolved. But the only problem is that it's still in the minority, perhaps less than 20%, 25% of people actually managing these risks in teams together, and they can't have a single view of risk, which is what we've been campaigning for a very long time in the people sense of the word. And what you've just been listening to is technology's view of it, and then we're looking at the sort of cyber and physical, how they relate to each other in convergence, which is basically more collaboration. And it's interesting that IFSEC did a survey quite recently where it was felt by 1,000 people that contributed to the survey that 56% of them thought that collaborating between physical and cybersecurity teams was a good idea. That's apart from and including sometimes the technologies that you've just been looking at, and we're grateful for those new technologies. The physical security systems, as we all know, have developed from analog to IP, and now they're converged, and it's all very interesting, and it's all very capable. But as we also know, with IoT, there are now new vulnerabilities coming in, and especially to smart buildings, which is why, as I mentioned, David Clark and his colleague Ian McPherson have really moved forward in trying to say, how are we going to address this? So the answer is not necessarily you've got to get these great, fantastic new technologies that we're seeing right now, but you need to start somewhere. So you need to sort of talk to the cybersecurity team and ask them how they can help you in your building and make sense of the attacks, if there are some, on your CCTV and other systems. And it's interesting, I think, that organizations are now waking up to the fact that there are cyber attacks on CCTV and access doors and all kinds of things. But how is it that we can really see those without being in the one same center and monitoring them? So these new technologies that Vidsys and others are actually talking about, as we've just seen, can actually help you monitor them in real time. So it's all very well having a mature cyber program for your physical security systems, if you've got that. But after you have those things, you still have to have the monitoring and this kind of response, which is what we've been talking about earlier, which is what we're talking about, the one platform in one location. So bringing in cyber and physical into that one center. And the only thing is there's not that many of these being built. There are some. We know about some in America and some here. But there really are very few. And the point of this webinar, I think, is to encourage organizations that have actually the capability to think, well, am I going to start building another new security operations center, or can I bring in all other things into the same center? So rather than build a new physical or security operations center or network operations center, build the same thing in the same location. And if you can't do that, then bring the two together into the one that you have got, or you close one down and put one into the other. So there are options here. And so the IoT problem in the smart building environment has been called the cyber physical threat. And there's been a lot of talk about this, but the fact is that we do have a problem now. And it takes people like David Clark and Ian and other colleagues, Holger Wagner and others, who have actually done some of this stuff. And we need to follow their example rather than wait and wonder what we can do. So my last slide is, let's start building converged security centres. First of all, find vendors of physical security systems which demonstrate cybersecurity or mature cybersecurity, because not all do. Then when you've done that, bring together the physical and cyber teams and consultants and help them start trying to work out what the cost savings are, which are pretty obvious. Less rent, less energy costs. If you've only got one centre, lots of obvious common sense ones. And then find or use real-time converged monitoring tools, such as the ones we've just been looking at. But there are others. As we know, there are good friends who do also automate physical security. And there are colleagues on the call that do this. And so we know about this sort of stuff, but sometimes we don't really operate it. And then for pen test the systems before you purchase them, build the centres and train the teams to use and deploy converged tools for 3 months before going live. Now, those sort of things are practical things, but I think that rounds up for what I want to really say. And thanks for everyone who's inspired me, and I've mentioned by name, and others who also know and understand convergence, as well as Saab and I and others here on the call do. Thank you, James.
Fantastic. Thank you, James, and thank you for joining. Right, so we'll move on to a few questions now. We've got one come in live. So it's a question for John, and this is, you gave a perfect picture of technological convergence, such as system integration, but what about convergence of management capabilities?
Thank you. And while we were presenting, I took the liberty of answering the question in the chat box, but I'll also provide a verbal answer. And I think one of the key benefits of convergence is the ability to not only pull in vast amounts of data that reside in those two previously disparate areas, but now what do you do with that data once you have it in your sphere? We provided examples of how you can manage that data and resolve risk within your organization from a security perspective. But what can we do as managers with that data, and how does that help our environments from a management perspective? So it's a really good question. And so what we have at Vidsys is a business intelligence dashboard, which allows security managers to be able to understand what is happening in their environment, both in real time and historically. And with the addition of data that pulls across the entire spectrum of devices, now you have a much richer set of data in order to be able to enrich that business intelligence for you to be able to make decisions about your security program, decisions about allocation of resources, decisions that are financially based, and you can provide those throughout your management chain to be able to better describe what is happening within your organization and your enterprise.
Fantastic. Thank you, John. I don't know if anyone else has anything to add to that. Okay, no worries. We'll move on now. Keep the questions coming in, by the way. One more here for you. Will this transformation also include the information security sector?
Shall I take that one, James?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks, Saab.
Effectively, the way that the approach works is you should be including any and every risk related to security. So if there are information security risks, they are security risks, and you can include those. The only limitation is what it is that you want to include within the Security Convergence Centre and the technology you're using to be able to provide responses to that. So yes, absolutely, it includes information security, physical security, cyber security, feeds that are social media feeds. It includes anything and everything, because the whole point of a Converged Security Centre is that you have got a single view of security risks, and that you've got the capability to respond to each of those risks. If you think about what you get in movies, and you watch the bad guys in all these movies, you'd never see all the bad guys in lots of different places, in lots of different teams, arguing as to who has got the better response and who should be doing what. Effectively, every single time they've got a goal in mind, which is to break down the security, and they do it as a single team. They don't break themselves down in different teams. And that's the same in reality. The bad guys do work, and they work in such a way that they are working against us in the enterprises, and we need to be working as effectively as a single unit from a single view of risk in exactly the same way. Thank you.
Great job. Really good points there. Anybody else like to add anything to that? Okay, no worries. I'll move on. Quite a topical one now for you, particularly for Vidsys and Micro Focus potentially. What can Converged Security Technologies do to help hospitals manage the risks they are now facing with the coronavirus?
Well, that's certainly a subject that's top of mind for all of us now, and becoming increasingly so with each passing day. And as we all know, hospitals and hospital security, they're typically on the front end, right? They're the front lines of these types of events, and they've trained for preparedness in response for these types of situations, and are ready to be putting additional security measures in place, particularly when these types of situations arise. The key differentiator in this particular event, though, is the emphasis on quarantining and sequestering of patients. That aspect, right, is all the more real in this particular kind of a scenario. So the need to ensure that, for example, access control protocols are being followed strictly, and that the area of containment remains that way, both from a physical person standpoint, but also from an environmental standpoint. So how can a converged security solution help in this regard? Well, with regard to access control, many hospitals already are equipped with solutions that alert on whether a patient or an object or a person moves outside of a certain geo-fenced area. We typically see these devices used with babies in maternity wards. We also see them in veterans hospitals for patient wandering. So these would be devices that would be used in this kind of a scenario, because you certainly wouldn't want objects or people getting outside of a geo-fenced area, and that information would be fed back into the security center. The second and equally important part of that, though, would be environmental, and I'll refer you to the earlier discussion about smart building technology. And clearly, this brings the need to understand and alert very quickly to any change in the quarantine environment, and this would bring that to an entirely different level. So pulling that smart building environmental data back into the security center to be able to alert quickly on a change in that environment would be very, very important. And sitting on top of other types of subsystems such as video analytics, emergency notification systems, and also social media to understand changes in what people are saying, and also pulling in the real-time data from, for example, from here in the States, we have the CDC, which is our entity that's reporting the cases of the coronavirus as they increase here in the States. Having that data pulled into the security center as well, it would also be very important. But clearly, this is a subject that we're going to be doing a lot of discussing over the next several weeks and months, I fear. But great question. Thank you very much.
No, absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. Sorry, Joe, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo John's, explanation of the situation here, because basically, the AI engine for Micro Focus that integrates with Vidsys, we can handle any data that is video, text, and audio, right? So obviously, John mentioned about, video analytics. We can certainly analyze the CCTV footage, and to correlate with, for example, a device, geofence, breach, and we can correlate that with video footage of certain specific area that is being monitored by the by the CCTV, and also John talk about people, social media, the social media chatter, so we can actually monitor any open source data out there, so broadcast news or social media like tweets, for example, coming from a certain postcode or zip code in the United States. We can monitor that and understand what people are talking about and also what the sentiments are associated with those tweets, for example. So that will add additional information and make it much richer for the operator to understand what's going on in the environment. So, thank you.
Great, thank you, Joe. One more question now. It's just come in from Brian Sims. Is there a particular vertical sector in which you believe convergence is really taking hold? What are the learnings to date with this?
Can I take that?
Sure. Go ahead,
Yep.
James.
Well, we understand that the business continuity area, facilities, is an area of growing interest in convergence, according to latest ACES research. This is where to start sometimes, where people think, how can I bring together physical and information security teams? And actually, it's in a crisis like we're in now, really, where you have to work in teams in a crisis to respond. And this is what we have to do. And using the technology that is out there now that we've just been hearing about, as well as working together with the experience and knowledge that we have, and the business continuity vector, I'd say.
This is John Gill, and I would just add to that. I think it's a good question. I think that the critical infrastructure space is a market that is ripe for this kind of an approach. When you think about the utilities and the energy sector and the importance that those organizations have to municipalities in terms of providing that energy, it's critical for that customer to be able to have the ability to not only manage from a physical perspective, but we've seen over the past several years the ability for hackers to be able to get into networked utilities and shut them down. And so the ability for an alert to surface and be managed as quickly as possible in that kind of a scenario is very, very important. The other aspect to this, and it's certainly the case here in the States, is that it's a very compliance-driven market. And so the ability for the solution to be able to help security organizations drive and meet compliance standards in the critical infrastructure space is key. And we're seeing customers use the solution to be able to help them meet compliance standards in this important area.
Okay, great. Thank you. Just got time for one last question now. Just having a look. It kind of relates to the previous question a little bit. Is there any information about security convergence specifically relating to prisons? Is there something anybody has anything to add to, or I can move on to the next one?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, right? We get this asked quite a bit on the Vidsys side. Again, I'm sorry, it's John Gill. There's really two areas I would say, interestingly, that we get asked a lot. That one is in the incarceration and the prison space, and the other is in casinos. And these are certainly in the prison space very access control heavy, right? Access control and intrusion detection and video heavy. We have not seen to this day, not that there aren't use cases that could be built around it, but certainly from our perspective, we have not seen the level of need on the convergence side. I think that where it may make sense are for here in the States, there are privately owned prisons in addition to government-owned prisons and correctional facilities, and those to be the ability for those to be managed centrally in a way that can allow a regional security center to have insight into what's happening throughout a widely dispersed number of facilities, I think would be a good use case in this particular area. But we're seeing mostly the physical security aspects in that particular market, and not as much convergence to date, in my view, anyway.
Okay, great. Thank you for that, John. Thank you for all the questions that have come in. Unfortunately, we haven't had time to answer all of them, but what we will do, as I discussed at the start, is send these questions out to the speakers, get some answers for you, and we will upload them to ifsecglobal.com in the form of an article over the next few weeks. So unfortunately, it's time to wrap up, but I'd just like to say on behalf of IFSEC and those that joined us today, thank you to James, Saab, John and Joe for their time. The role Converged Security Centres are set to play moving forwards in the security sector is clearly an important one, and you can find out all about them at IFSEC International. There is also plenty of content available to read on IFSEC Global, much of it written by James and Saab themselves, with input from the team at Vidsys, and I'm sure there's plenty more to come following this webinar. So do visit the site and share if you find anything interesting. As mentioned at the start, we will be emailing the recording and slides around in the near future, so don't worry if you missed anything or came in late, that's absolutely fine. And thank you all for your time and questions, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you.